I think me predicting MK Dons to win the league has been a bit of a curse in previous seasons, hasn't it? Because they've either been relegated from League One, as they were in 22-23, or they massively underachieved with a 20th place finish last season. And those outcomes, either side of the 23-24 playoff campaign, and even that ended disappointingly with a 7-1, I think it was, or maybe 8-1 aggregate loss to Crawley in the playoff semi-final. I think it's led the club to go for a change of strategy. They've gone away from the possession football that they've opted for under previous coaches like Mike Williamson and Scott Lindsay. And they've gone for a manager in Paul Warne, who does have a good track record. Outside the championship, he's only ever won promotion in full seasons. So great from a CV point of view. Very good from a point of view of getting teams fit. Very good from a point of view of culture setting. One of the best in terms of leading with empathy and vulnerability, and a really modern leader in that sense. But he's stylistically, he's not a fit with the quote unquote the MK way. I think some fans are sort of looking forward to a bit of a change. Whether it'll look that way when that some of the football is going to be a bit different to what a lot of MK Dons fans are going to be used to is a possible question mark. But they have gone big and they've gone early in the transfer window because they've signed Nathaniel Mendez-Lang, who was playing in the Championship last season with Derby County, and helped them win promotion from League One the year before under Warne. And they've also signed Aaron Collins, who won Player of the Year in League One in 2023. So the ambitions there. Can Warne deliver a fourth promotion of his career at Stadium MK? Plenty to get stuck into in this summer deep dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. If you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would really help us out. Delighted to be joined by Jonathan Harries and Dan of DippyDon95 on Twitter. Good morning, gents. Thanks very much for joining us. Jonathan, how do you feel about the disappointments of the last 3 seasons at MK Dons? And are you in a stage of kind of having processed it now and looking forward to a new era under Paul Warne?
Well, I had processed it until you brought up the Crawley game against Brentford. That's really sort of stoked the memories. But no, seriously, it just feels like it's a completely fresh start under Paul Warne. He's come in last 4 games of last season. We didn't concede. I know we didn't. We only won 1, but we didn't concede, which for me was a major plus. He's got positivity. He's obviously got the players in he wants so far, and just everything on and off the pitch this summer just seems like it's fitting into place.
Dan, how do you feel about that change of strategy? Because I'm not sure how when the games start and maybe the team doesn't look after the ball as much as maybe MK Dons fans are used to. It does feel that right now, at least, there is a sort of an appetite for a bit more direct football, a bit more urgency in the way that the team plays. And from having spoken to you off camera, it seems like you're possibly in that category.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been one that doesn't necessarily care for the style of play so long as it's winning football. You know what I mean? So we go through we go through stages as a fan base as well. So like Robinson left, we brought in Nielsen, and that was a different style that was somewhat welcomed at the time because we weren't doing very well under Robinson towards the end. But then that sort of style does seem to get what's the right word for it? It gets criticised a lot easier than the nice football, and I think that's just that's a football thing. That's not just an MK thing. So like when Alexander when it wasn't going right with Alexander, we seemed to change up on him really quickly. Whereas like with other managers, such as for example like Russell Martin, that wouldn't have happened because the style of football was maybe a little bit more attractive. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen again, because we've gone through far too many managers over the last 10 years, you could probably say, like 9 years maybe since Robinson left. We've gone through far too many managers we do seem to have that sort of level of expectation where if it doesn't go right for a few games, people are asking for a change. And I think that is a big, big reason of why we were where we were last year. I think if it is easy to say that, and I know I'm probably going to go back on myself. But say, for example, we did stick with Lindsay, I reckon I'd still be sort of feeling as positive going into the summer as I am with Paul Warne, if you get what I mean, because it's stability. I think is one of the things we need more than absolutely anything.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Jonathan, what do you make of the work done by Neil Hart, sort of looking upstairs? Because there's been I suppose, going right upstairs, been a change of ownership, hasn't there, with the new Kuwaiti owners? They came in early on last season, didn't they? Trying to remember, I think it was around then. So what have you made of the new Kuwaiti owners so far?
Well, I think it was announced the day before the Bradford game, start of the season. So it was like he got straight into it. I think we'd signed Aaron the Main that night as well, and he's a very quiet owner. Is Fahad. You don't see much social media from him. You don't see him in videos like Pete Winkleman used to, and for me that's quite refreshing because it feels like he's letting the managers and letting Neil Hart and Liam Sweeten, who I'm sure we'll get onto at some point, do their thing. As for Neil Hart, I can't complain. He's rejuvenated the fan experience. We've got more like food kiosks. He's doing more family fun days. I think we've got one of the cheapest season tickets in the EFL as well. So he's trying to get the crowds in. He realises Milton Keynes is quite a unique area, obviously with location and everything, and being a new town. So just little things like that. We've also changed shirts sponsorship from Castor to Reebok as of yesterday. So again, another major change, and it just feels like everything is just being refreshed under this new ownership.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dan, I guess with an owner not being quite so public facing, I guess it does put a lot more control with the CEO. That's Neil Hart. What have you made of his first year or so in the role?
Well, I will just add that while he's not necessarily public facing, he is very involved. I think there's quite a lot of conversations that go on between, if not the entire consortium, it's Fahad and Neil Hart and then Liam Sweeten. So yeah, he's not just giving away his money and letting the club do as they will, if you get what I mean.
I
But
see, yeah.
no, Neil Hart's been a real breath of fresh air. He's been the first sort of CEO that I've felt since Andy Cullen that has really sort of like made strides with the fans, like and like just as John said, just improved the experience of actually going to the club. It did feel for a long time, especially like towards the end of Pete Winkleman's reign, that you could just all the club would want you to do is rock up at 5 to 3 and then be gone by 5 o'clock again. But now there's stuff going on beforehand. They've brought back the red dot bar, which was the bar sort of like just outside the stadium, but still linked with the stadium, which is somewhere that a lot of people used to go before the game that that got closed and got moved to the hotel. Like the entire hotel, instead of being a football club in a hotel stadium sort of thing, it's now a hotel within a football club. So like the roles have sort of been reversed. It seems like football is definitely coming first with the new ownership and yeah, like as I said, like Neil Hart's done really well just to bring like a lot of variety to the club and the season tickets. We must be like the only club, if not there's only a handful that have actually reduced our season ticket prices this year rather than put them up. Like I've seen some prices in League Two, like you're getting upwards of 400, £500 for some of them. Our early bird season ticket was like 290 quid or something like that for an adult, and our stadium, like no matter where you sit, you're going to get a good view. So it's not exactly sort of like restricted views or sort of like the bad part of the stadium, if you get what I mean. So yeah, it's been very, very positive. It's definitely been more positive off the pitch than it has on the pitch over the last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jonathan, more of a long-serving member at the club, I suppose, or staff. Don't even know what the term would be, but off-field operator is is Liam Sweeting, and as sporting director, I suppose 3 years ago we would have been talking about Liam Sweeting as the most important person at MK Dons. Do you think that? To some extent, his autonomy with the new ownership and with some of the results that have happened over the last 3 years, his sort of stature, if that's the right word, or authority has been compromised a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree to a certain extent. I mean, I'm still 50-50 on Liam Sweeting. Obviously, he came in and like that summer with Russell Martin was just ridiculous, and I know that just felt like a one-off summer where we were getting players like Scott Twine, Troy Parrott, Matt O'Reilly, etc. And yeah, it just feels that he must have something about him for it to be reported that we offered Sweeting a new contract when Carlisle came in for Mike Williamson, and apparently they wanted Liam Sweeting as part of the deal. So Fahad must have seen something in Liam Sweeting to suggest that he wanted to keep him. So in that sense, I think we've got to trust Fahad, but certainly it can't all be on Liam Sweeting. But I think a large portion of certain transfers, and obviously not every transfer works out, and he's been working under three different managers in a year now, so different strategies, etc. But for me, he is still probably one of the best at what he does when he gets it right. I know he got credited a lot with the Dan Crowley move in January. I know they really said he was a big part of that. So he's obviously good at what he does. So there is that to hold on to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Please, Dan. Yeah,
just a little bit on Sweeting, because it's been sort of said that the owners really like him, but for the fans, I think this might be sort of last chance saloon, because he is very hit and miss with some of the transfers. Like we had the summer after we lost to Wickham in the playoffs, where we went with like a younger, more sellable sort of transfer window. So like do what we had done quite well, like bring in young players and try and develop them and sell them on. So bringing in people like Dara Burns and Dawson Devoy and that sort of thing, which wasn't what we needed at the time. Like it's easy saying that with hindsight, I know, but that wasn't what we needed at the time. So that was a very, very missed transfer window.
Yeah.
And then last summer as well, like on the face of it, it was a really, really good transfer window. But
yeah,
I don't think any. I might be wrong, John. You can come in with a player that did work last year. I can't think of any player other than maybe Luke Offord, and maybe to a certain extent Connor Lemonhay Evans. Other than that, the transfer window you'd argue it was a massive failure, even though we brought in players like Liam Kelly, Lawrence
Do
Maguire.
you think it was too many players? Because it looks, just at scanning it, I don't have the exact number to hand, but it looks like it was about 20 players last summer. Is it hard when you bring in that many players to almost develop any of them because there's always too many in the building?
There is that, yeah, and I think it is just a case. We've had probably about 3 major rebuilds in the last 5 years. And again, that comes with the lack of stability, because we had a summer transfer window with Graham Alexander where we were bringing in all of his players. Then Mike Williamson was there for the January and the next summer, and then he was gone by the end of September. So January we then had Scott Lindsay, and he was bringing in his players, and now we're doing exactly the same with Paul Warne. So it's a massive outlay. It's a massive change. I think I worked out as I was sort of like preparing for this. We've got about maybe four or five players that were here at the start of the 23-24 window. And that's it. And that's 2 seasons ago. And we've only got four of the same players. So it's just been massive rebuilds after massive rebuilds. And as you can see with where we've been finishing, it's just not been working. So I'm hoping this is the last one that we have to do for a little while. And that's definitely what the ownership and what Sweeting would want, and Paul Warne as well. Like he's come in, he said he's here for the long term. That tends to track with how he was at Rotherham and how he was at Derby as well. So fingers crossed. This is the last. Yeah,
I
last
think
rebuild, the last major change of squad personnel.
I think my sort of feeling on this, and guys, either of you feel free to jump in here, is when Liam Sweeting has been very process driven, where he's liked a certain style of football and he's been very data driven with the way that he recruits. And you've appointed a manager who likes a completely different style of football and is entirely, almost entirely on character profiling with the way that he recruits. It doesn't really. I think he said it in his press conference that he's not a data person. And so, what my question would be is, yes, I can see the upsides to Paul Warne because he's got such a compelling record. I do really appreciate that. But if it doesn't work with Paul Warne, my question will be, where does the club go then? Because the club's is going to be making some big financial commitments towards making the style of Paul Warne's play work, which is important because the squad hasn't been built for that. But then, how do you pivot? The club I don't think the club's going to have this belief in the Paul Warne vision. It's just Paul Warne's. They're buying the record. They're not buying the vision. That's what it feels to me. And so I think there's less leeway if things go wrong for the club to have any kind of continuity that you've described, Dan.
Yeah, I think in terms of what the club wants, it's different than it was under Pete Winkelman. Pete was sort of style of play. We are different. We are who we are. We like the young sort of like managers coming in. We like this sort of way of doing things. Fahad and the Kuwaiti consortium seem to be like, we want to be in the championship, and how we get there is how we get there. It doesn't matter. So while quite a lot of people have, like, I know you were a little bit concerned, not maybe concerned's not the right word, but you sort of get my drift as to the Paul Warne appointment because it was completely different. And
I
because
think if you're very outcome driven in how you approach things, I think that can cause problems because I think clubs are at their best when they focus on the process and not think, "Oh, we'll just get there," and the process doesn't matter. The process matters. The process is how you get there. So that's where I'm a little bit.
Yeah, I get that, and I do think if it doesn't work with Paul Warne, I've got no idea where we go. It's because honestly, it's how we've been for however long. We got rid of Robinson, we brought in Nielsen for sort of a bit of a change. That didn't work, so then we came back. We tried Machichi, got relegated. Brought in Tisdale, which is, I would say, probably the most comparable season to probably this season, maybe, where we were favourites then. We were bringing in probably players that could arguably have been League One quality players at the time as well. And we managed to sort of just sneak over the line, but it was effectively job done. And the main reason he got sacked the next year was we had a massive striker injury crisis. He couldn't quite work out how to do things without a striker and lost the job. But then after that, who did we bring in? Russell Martin, another completely different style of management, style of play. Tried to keep the same thing with Liam Manning, but again, like there were subtle differences there.
Yeah,
that ended up not working out. So what did we do? Mark Jackson.
Oh, it was Mark Jackson, wasn't it?
But then Graham Alexander came in for the same sort of profile as Tisdale. It didn't work, so then we went back to the possession style with Mike Williamson, and it's just we've been flip flopping for so long that what I can see happening if it doesn't work with Warne, we probably will go for the same sort of route of right, who's like a young up and coming manager that plays nice football sort of thing. So it's I'm feeling very confident about the season, but I'm probably not as confident as some of the people that you'll see online because of just how things have been over the last however long. And yeah, if it doesn't work with Warne, it's going to be another completely different profile. It's going to be another rebuild because it'll be players that we have that the new manager's not going to want, for example. And it's it's strange. It's strange looking back at the last however many years, really.
Do you have a more what's your perspective on it, Jonathan?
I just completely agree with Dan. I mean, fair play for remembering all their managers for a start, mate. That's great research. So yeah, fair play. And as you say, we just, I think the big thing out of this is we just need stability on the pitch, off the pitch, just everywhere. Because as Dan says, we're, without sounding arrogant, we're the big targets in League Two this season. Probably us and Chesterfield are going to be the main two that are going to be the big two in League Two. I mean, last 2 seasons we've had Stockport, Wrexham, Bradford, Doncaster. We've had teams sort of that we've been competing against, but I think this is probably, as Dan said, probably the first season since Tisdale has been in charge where you can say there's no reason why we can't win this league. So for me, as I say, I completely agree with Dan.
So let's have a look at the squad then, guys. Dan, I wanted to ask you about Craig McGillivray. Would you be happy? He's certainly been a good goalkeeper outside the Championship in recent years, certainly with Portsmouth. Do you think, would you be happy for him to be your number one next season?
Yeah, I'd be happy. I think he was relatively good when he was sort of like our first choice keeper back under Alexander and when Williamson came in. And then it's just been an absolute nightmare, I think, of a transfer for him because he wasn't necessarily Williamson's type of goalkeeper. So we sent him out on loan there. He brought in a different goalkeeper in the summer in Tom McGill, and he was sort of playing second fiddle. He didn't really get a game until the last couple of games of Ben Gladwin coming in. So I'm hoping for his sake he can get some. But again, it all comes down to stability really for us. If he can get some game time, like sort of make the number one shirt his own, I do think we've got one of the better goalkeepers in the league. But it's just been such a strange instability. I think are going to be my two sort of like main words for today because it's been quite bizarre really, like how the club have treated him since he's joined. But I don't think there's anybody that there's certainly nobody in the club at the moment that would come close. I think maybe if we sign Truman up again, we've then got a decent sort of like 2 goalkeepers that can be fighting for the shirt.
Yeah.
But personally, I want to see McGillivray there. I want to see him sort of like in the first team for 10, 15, 20 games coming up to January. And then if he can do what we all know that he's capable of, we're not going to have an issue in the goalkeeping department.
Connor Truman, Jonathan, do you think he'll stay on?
I hope so. I mean, from what I saw of him, he didn't make any massive mistakes. He wasn't, dare I say it, apologies, Crew fans, he wasn't a Philip Marshall or anything. It would just be nice to have a good, stable goalkeeper unit. Probably the first time since Dave Martin and Lee Nichols. Probably you'd probably say that was probably quite a stable goalkeeper unit. And
Fisher had one good season, didn't he?
Yeah, and certainly for me, McGillivray gives the defence more confidence as a goalkeeper. He comes out for crosses. He commands free kicks. He'll kick it long if the option is to kick it long. He won't try and play it short all the time and play ourselves into trouble, which in League Two is something you need. So certainly, as Dan says, I'm not going to complain if McGillivray is the number one start of the season.
I think he did enough at the end of last season as well, because he came in sort of in Ben Gladwin's like last couple of games was relatively fine, and then Paul Warne came in, gave him the confidence, sort of gave him the "you're my number one" conversation, and I think it's literally from those last 4 games as to why we've sort of all agreed that we'd extend his contract for we'd pull the trigger on his we'd pull the extension clause. Sorry. So yeah, it's a big season for him. It's a big season for manager faith in him as well, I think. And from all the sound bites that we got from Paul Warne at the end of the season, that's definitely there. So let's hope he can kick on and put in the same sort of performances like he did when he was at Burton and he relegated us.
Oh yes, on that final day with those saves, yeah. So where was I? Right back. Now Aaron Nemain, I would say, is a kind of specialist wing back. I think if Paul Warne played with wing backs, I think he'd be an option there. But I'm not sure as a right back he would necessarily. I'd almost have him as a kind of a right wing option rather than a right back. So the other options are Gethin Jones, who may or may not remain for next season, and Phoenix Schultz, who I think has come through the academy.
I don't think Phoenix will be more of a first team option. He's just come back, or he's still in the middle of quite a major injury as well. So I think maybe a loan would be better for him. But I agree with you on Aaron Lemaine. I think if we do play sort of like a 4-2-3-1, like Paul Warne has liked to do in the past, I wouldn't mind him as an option as the winger, because where we were at our best, I'd say consistently last season, was when he was sort of up the pitch. We could play the ball through, like in the middle of the centre back and the fullback or the wing back. He could run on and get the ball into the middle, and that's where we did seem to score a lot of our goals, especially in the early part of the season when he was the league's leader for assists, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But Gethin Jones, I think, is a pretty important buy for us, because that does give us sort of like a bit more defensive stability, because that's something that Aaron Lemaine isn't good at, and he gets a lot of pelters from our fans for his sort of defensive inability, I'd probably say. And maybe even, I don't know, but maybe like Luke Offord has sort of, he's been our sort of like wide centre back and under a 3. So if needs be, maybe someone like him could go out there, or Lemonhay Evans, as he's played sort of like right wing back before. And yeah, we've got multiple options that aren't necessarily specialists, but the signing of Gethin Jones does sort of add that. Again, it's the word. It's that sort of like stability in the position where, if we are going a bit more defensive, we can put him in there. He seems to be a natural in that position. So yeah, gives us more options than just Nemain, which is what we really had last season, which is why we ended up playing like Lemonhay Evans there for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at central defence, then you've got Jonathan, you've got Luke Offord there, who I think was mentioned as one of the better performers last season. But you've also got Jack Sanders coming, and Charlie Waller, who have come through the academy, and Nathan Thompson, who I think had one pretty good game and then got injured quite early on, didn't he? So so a few options there in central defence.
Absolutely, and then you add Sam Sherring to that as well, who was injured for most of last season as well, and our defensive options look really good. I'm really impressed with Jack Sanders. I know you, Gab, were really impressed towards the end of the season with Sanders and his defensive ability, and he just seemed to grow in confidence probably from the Cheltenham away game onwards. I mean, I was at Crewe and he was just phenomenal that game. He just won absolutely everything defensively and seems like such a leader. Say Luke Offord, he quietly went about his business, did what he needed to do. I did feel sorry for him because he was left exposed a lot by Aaron Lemaine last season, and you could see sometimes he was just basically saying to Aaron, "Come on, I need some help." And I think, as Dan said, the signing of Jones will help that. And Nathan Thompson, I hope he has a real good season. That his debut, he was absolutely immense, and then unfortunately, I think someone landed on his leg for the Harrogate game. Was it Dan? And that's when he did his ACL, I think, or PCL. And it's good to have some real good, solid centre back options, because that's ultimately what gets you success in League Two. If you look at the how good defences were with the teams that were promoted last season.
Yes, absolutely. Dan, is Luke Offord somebody you'd like to see yourselves build the defence around?
Yeah, I think we didn't do a Player of the Year awards last year for understandable reasons, because it's been our worst season since the club moved to Milton Keynes, basically. But Offord was one of the players. I think I would have probably voted for him if we had a vote. It was between probably him, Gilby for the first half of the season, and Lemonhay Evans for the second part of the season, probably as our Player of the Year, I would say. So having someone like Offord to build the defense right. But even I think we actually brought him into play as more like sort of like a defensive midfielder. So it again, like we've got looking at the squad, and you're thinking like where everybody can play. We've got we've got a very, very versatile squad. So having someone like Offord, who, yeah, he was very well. I say very good. We weren't very good last season, but he was good for the squad's level last year. And if he can sort of like under Warne, maybe push forward a little bit and play in that midfield, then that's another sort of like, yeah, it's another option. But I think centre back is probably our strongest position. I don't like looking at them. I don't think we need to bring in anybody unless we sell.
Mm.
So that's certainly something, considering the defence last year was probably our weakest point on the pitch. And
Yeah.
yet Paul Warne he came in and he somehow managed to turn that absolute shambles into 4 clean sheets in 4 games.
Not bad. Yeah, I think also Nathan Thompson finding full fitness is going to be like a new signing, really. Joe Tomlinson, Jonathan, he's somebody who I know has tremendous ability. He's got a lovely passing range, and I think he can contribute. But he's had a bit of an up and down career so far, largely due to injuries. So it's a big season for him ahead.
He was the player I was most disappointed in last season. Might be because I absolutely love Joe Tomlinson as a player. Everyone that knows me knows that. I'm not going to hide away from it. And he was really disappointing. There were times where his positioning was just, you thought, is he getting coached defensively? And if you think the partnership he had with Gilby the season before, that was probably one of our strongest areas, and it just seemed like that side fell apart for one reason or another. I mean, he has committed his longer term future to MK Dons last season with Alex Gilby, so he obviously believes in the project. I know he's just recently moved to the area at the end of the season, got a newborn as well, so hopefully this break and new manager, and say a manager that hopefully believes in him, we'll see the best of Joe Tomlinson, because for me he's one of the best left wing backs that in League Two. I would like to see some competition for him. That always seems to be a thing with MK Dons. They always seem to stick with a left back and not have any competition. You think of Lewington, then Dan Harvey, now Joe Tomlinson. So it's certainly an area I'd like to strengthen competition wise. But certainly Joe Tomlinson should be the starting left back or left wing back at the start of the season.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of central midfield, then I think there's Connor Lemonhay Evans in the. Do you know, I quite like Kane Thompson-Summers from bits and pieces that I saw at one point in terms of that passing range and sort of ball progression qualities that he's got. It wouldn't surprise me if Liam Kelly and Jay Williams went back to Crawley with Scott Lindsay. And then you've got Callum Tripp as well, who's come through the academy. So how are you feeling about your midfield options at the moment, Dom?
I will just say I would be very surprised if Liam Kelly goes back to Crawley, just from some of the rumours that have come about from his last from Lindsay's stint here. It seems like he sort of singled out Kelly, not necessarily very nicely, and it's quite telling that we all thought once Lindsay came in, okay, Kelly's not had the best start of the season, he's going to pick up now. And if anything, he got a little bit worse. He just wasn't the player that we'd seen from Crawley. But then when Warne came in, he was like a different player.
Oh,
I don't know
really?
if it's because, yeah, I don't know if it's
That's
because
really I find that really counterintuitive. I would have guessed the complete opposite, but isn't
yeah,
that funny?
no, honestly, we were the same. But I don't know if it's because I think we played him a little bit further forward up the pitch as well. So I don't know if that was anything to do with it. But yeah, Kelly, I know quite a lot of Crawley fans are saying, "Oh, we'll get him back, this and that and the other." But I wouldn't be so sure on that. Whether he does stay or whether we do sort of try and move him on, I'm not too sure. I don't really think there's anybody in that central midfield other than Lemonhay Evans and Tripp that I would necessarily be sad to see go, if you get what I mean.
Right.
Thompson Summers more as a loan, like he had flashes, but you could tell he'd just come up for a non-league. You could tell he wasn't really there with the EFL at that sort of point. So maybe a loan to get him some regular game time, considering we are going to be looking to break into the top 7, the top 3, that sort of thing. That would probably be what I do for him. So central midfield, I think, has got maybe the widest scope for us to change from now to the start of the season, because Jay Williams I can see as selling, like, unless somehow Paul Warne sort of like manages to I guess get on with him and
I mean,
find
he
a
is
role
quite a
for him.
tenacious midfielder who likes a challenge. So whether Warne sees something in that,
Yeah, he's probably the only one of that sort of that nature that we've got, which on paper I would say, yeah, keep him because he's a different type of profile. But we haven't really seen it. Was it sort of February the last time we saw him, John?
Yeah, it probably was February, and I'm not sure if it was injury or whether he fell out with the management at the time. I honestly don't know, because I don't think the club reported an injury, did they, Dan? They didn't say he was injured from what I can remember.
No.
He was certainly a midfielder you could guarantee got a yellow card every game. If you were into that sort of thing, first yellow card, it was always going to be Jay Williams. And as you said, there's not many midfielders that have got that profile in our squad, but I'm not sure if Jay Williams will be here at the end of the summer. There's just something at the back of my mind saying that he's going to move on at the end of the summer. And as Dan said, it wouldn't sadden me if he left. And for me, if we keep him, then good. Hopefully, we'll get a better version of Jay Williams. But it obviously wouldn't be a sad loss if he went.
We have to be quite ruthless as well. Like the only stumbling block there would probably be his contract.
Yeah,
because as far as I understand, we've got him on relatively decent wages for a decent amount of time. I think he's still quite young, isn't he? Is he like 24, 25 or something like that? So yeah, so that would be the thing for me. And as I say, if Paul Warne decides I can get on with you, we can fit you into the team. Like we can, yeah.
I think
I'd love that
Warren's
kind of
very
thing.
good at building a culture. I think if he, over the course of pre-season, he can build a culture with the people he recruits, but also the way that he leads, because he is a very good. One of his methods is when he was at Rotherham was basically putting down on the whiteboard who are we doing this for. So he would write down, I don't know, someone from his family, and then people would write down, I'm doing this for my uncle who's in a difficult spot, or I'm doing this for, and it's basically kind of personalizing the relationships in a way that very few managers actually do. And I think he does have that ability to build those connections that make the group mean a bit more, and create a culture where people go above and beyond for one another. And I think that can sometimes translate onto the pitch. So I think if Warne can establish that kind of culture very early on, then somebody like Jay Williams, I think, almost by osmosis, is just going to kind of get taken with it. I don't actually know what sort of character Jay Williams is, and I wouldn't like to sort of speculate, but either way, I'd hope that he'd be able to buy in if he does stay in, just because of the kind of cultures that one can create.
Yeah, and I think while I did say that I can see a lot of change in the central midfield role, if you look at them on paper for the league, again, it's a relatively good
yeah,
central midfield group. So I do think it is a bit of a refresh that everything that sort of came before, Paul Warne's probably going to say, right, okay, the end of the season was the end of the season. We draw a line here, come back in for pre-season. I'm going to assess you as if it's day one.
Mm.
And so while like even if we do keep a lot of the players from last season, and quite a lot of the fans probably won't be happy with that because of how they played last season, I do think it is just it's a brand new environment really that that's and if you think about it in the case of we are making some big money signings, if you can limit that in some way because you've got the players already in the building, that can only really be a bonus, which means like our budget can go somewhere else on a caliber of player that's maybe like a step higher than we would be looking at if we needed to bring 3 central midfielders in or 2 strikers in or this, that, and the other.
we've linked it on perfectly to the signing of Aaron Collins. I mean, Jonathan, what a brilliant signing that is. Somebody who was on paper well above League Two, and it shows the caliber that you can still recruit.
It's absolutely sensational, Gab. When it dropped last night, A, I was glad it dropped before today's show, and B, I was just buzzing that we finally got it over the line, because I think it had been rumoured for at least a week, 10 days, Dan, had been strongly rumoured that it was happening. And I think someone, Warne, tried to get at Derby, I believe, before he moved from Bristol to Bolton as well. So it's obviously someone he's been chasing for a while. From the highlights that I've seen, he's not just there for the tap-ins, he can link play. So the rotation with players like Mendes Lang, Dan Crowley, etc., that should in theory be good. And I just think that for a League Two side to go to a established League One side like Bolton and just go and buy Aaron Collins and just say to the rest of the league, we're here, we mean business. For me, it just shows an ambition, and it shows that Paul Warne is being backed, because I'm fairly certain if he thought he wasn't going to get back, we wouldn't be talking about Paul Warne today.
Yeah, well, let's hope that's the case. But certainly one of the standout signings of the League Two summer. Speaking of which, you've also signed Dan Nathaniel Mendes Lang, who starred in Derby County's promotion-winning side in League One, and was very much regarded as somebody they lent on so much in terms of that counter-attacking outlet, because of his athleticism, and he was the kind of player that they missed when he wasn't there. So, and this is League One. 12 months ago. So it shows again another really high caliber player that MK Dons has backed Paul Warne to bring in.
The owners are definitely putting their money where their mouth is. And I say that even as Mendes Lang isn't necessarily the highest paid player. Definitely not now that Collins has come in. But yeah, it shows the caliber of player. I think for the fans to bring them back on side and get them sort of in a really positive mood early, but also for the players that are already in the building and the players that might be in the building come August. I think if you're making signings this early of the caliber as Mendes Lang, Collins, even Hepburn Murphy, really, considering he was quite good at Crawley last year, like despite their relegation. I think it's telling the league that we're here. We're not, well, touch wood, we're not going to be the MK Dons of the last 12 months. But
last 3 years.
We weren't too bad in 23-24. We just got an absolute mauling from Scott Lindsay. But yeah, no, Mendes, but also his leadership, I think, because he is experienced. He has gone through, like, he's been promoted at Derby. I don't know if he got promoted at Peterborough as well, but he had a decent spell there, and he's is he a Guatemalan international?
I think it's somewhere in Central America.
Yeah, so that sort of level of experience and everything, that's one of the main things I think that we've been missing over the last few years. Like, yes, we've had Gilby, we've had Lewington and that, but it has been a relatively young squad, and as I said before, like a massive turnover. So like the leaders in the squad were your players like Warren O'Hora, who, while he definitely was captain material, he was still only 23, 24. And Jack Tucker had been here one of the longest, like for some of the, like, he was one of the longest serving players, and I wouldn't rely on him to tie my shoelaces, let alone sort of like lead a back line. But yeah, so like the players like Mendes Lang, and despite us probably not getting him, McGoldrick, that sort of caliber of, that's who we want to bring in. I think that can only leave us in quite good stead. I realise I'm not actually doing a very good job of sort of like underplaying us and making you sort of like not put us in top spot, but actually talking about it and going through it and seeing sort of like what we're doing, who we're bringing in, the level of funds that we've got available to us, which, while we weren't necessarily poorly backed under Winkleman, it's just a completely different level now. It's we like now, especially now that Birmingham have been promoted, we must be one of the one of the richest clubs in the bottom two divisions, I think. And that's not just me sort of like trying to hype everything up. It's like everything that's been put into the club just shows just a level of expenditure that we've just never had available to us before.
Yeah, absolutely, an exciting proposition in that respect for sure. Jonathan, I wanted to ask you about Dan Crowley. I mean, I would have said before this podcast, he's 5'6", I think it is. How's he going to fit into a Paul Warne system if the ball's going over his head a lot? And is the style going to get the best out of him? But from what Dan said in terms of Warne managed to get some good performances out of Liam Kelly, could Paul Warne find a way of making it work with Dan Crowley?
Well, firstly, I hope he plays him higher up the pitch than what he was under previous managers. I remember a game away at Barrow where he was picking the ball up at right wing back and then bringing the ball forward. And I'm like, you can't utilise the skills and the skill set of Dan Crowley that deep. I know the move from Notts County wasn't like the greatest, and Notts County fans weren't happy with what happened. But you can't say no to someone like Dan Crowley. He gives everything. Yes, there's a running joke. He spins more. He does more turns than going round and roundabout at Milton Keynes. But for me, now we've got a better quality of player in the squad, like an Aaron Collins and Mendes Lang, Hepburn Murphy. Obviously, he loves his little channel balls to Aaron the Main that Dan was describing earlier as well. And for me, I think he could be key to unlocking a lot of the defences in League Two if we keep him fit and motivated. I would like to see a few more goals from him and him to shoot from outside the box more, if I'm being critical. But obviously, I don't think Paul Warne actually saw Dan Crowley play much. I think he got injured towards the end of the season, didn't he, Dan? So he didn't see Crowley. He didn't see Gilby, I don't think. And for me, if you can get the best out of those two, then we stand a real good chance of automatic promotion.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. I mean, so go on, Dan.
No, it's just on Dan Crowley. I don't think we'll see him much before Christmas. I think from what I've heard, his injury is quite a lengthy one. Like I might be wrong there. We have sort of done well at like hiding like the extensive injuries, but from what I've heard, it is quite a lengthy one, which might even help a little bit for him to sort of like get into the culture of a Paul Warne team. Provided, of course, we don't sack him by September, which we're sort of probably likely to do. But if we can get some stability, and if we can get some, if we can get like higher up the table, and we are sort of playing a bit more expansive, like decent attacking football, then that might unlock him a little bit more because he was excellent at Notts County. He was so good at Notts County, but then he came to us while we were on our downward slope. Like he came to us in January. I think in December we might have been third, but then we won something like 3 games since after New Year. It was something really, really bad like that.
Yeah.
So if we can start attacking, if we can start sort of like dominating teams, and we can do what this team should be doing, considering the level of players we have, Dan Crowley can be somebody that can just unlock a different level, and he can he has the capability to be the standout star in this team.
Yeah, I think though somebody like Aaron Collins in that second striker role, if it's 4-2-3-1, no idea what the formation's going to be, but I think Aaron Collins is that second striker because he's a pressing monster, because he's got that physical capability. I think he's a better fit for the Paul Warne style, presuming you bring in another target man. And I could see Crowley actually in the second half of the season being maybe a wild card off the bench, but I don't know whether the team's going to be built around him. So we'll have to see on that one. In terms of the centre forward position, Dan, you've got Russian Hepburn Murphy, who signed from Crawley after a good end to that season under Scott Lindsay. You've got Scott Hogan, who again can score goals, but I'm not sure he's not a target man, and nor is Callum Hendry. So for me, that's going to be the big priority. I think for Paul Warne to be able to implement the style he wants, he needs a Michael Smith type. He needs a target man to sort of aim for.
Yeah, I think he might even be hoping that the problems at Sheffield Wednesday carry on for a lot longer, so that Michael Smith can go on a free transfer. Because
Yeah,
that's definitely one name that's been sort of bandied around. But in terms of strikers, that does seem to be where most of our rumours are sort of leading. Because obviously McGoldrick can play up there.
Mm.
Collins can play up front. I think he might have done that for Bolton and Bristol Rovers. I'm not too
yeah,
too clued up on him, if I'm being perfectly honest. But then we're also being linked to was it Stephen Humphreys, who, like, while he might sort of be like a wide forward more, he can also play up there, and just that does seem to be sort of like where most of our links are leading. So it's definitely one of the places that needs strengthening the most, even despite what we've got in the building. Scott Hogan had flashes. He scored an absolute worldie against Fleetwood, I think it was,
yeah,
which is it shows the quality that he has there, but he's just not shown it enough. And the same with Hendry, really. Like, I think Hendry's best moment last season was he came out of he came out and warmed up in Dean Lewington's like last home game in a ginger wig, and everybody laughed. And that, like, for me, I didn't really see anything else there. So I can see one or both of them going. I can see us sort of like looking to move them on and just bringing in sort of like a new striker lineup that
Mick
will be able
Hucknall.
to, yeah, that will be able to get us not just out of League Two but League One, because that seems to be sort of like the level of players that we're trying to go for. We're trying to build a League One capable squad.
Mm. Yeah, let's hope you can do that. In terms of what one thing I wanted about was Jonathan Lecco, whether you think he'll stay on or whether you'd expect him to leave this summer.
I think he's a good option to have off the bench. I think the quality that we've brought in with Ben Murphy can play out wide, Mendes Lang can play out wide. Obviously, Aaron the main. It's nice to have someone like Lecco as a impact player, and you did see towards the end of last season he was putting a lot more effort in, even if it wasn't coming off for him. I think he was denied a goal at Cheltenham for offside, and he tried a couple more shots that had just went wide. So the effort was there, and I know that was maybe something aimed at him earlier in his career, Gab. Like the effort wouldn't be there, the talent would be there, but not necessarily the effort. And maybe someone like Paul Warne can elevate him to that next level, because he's still only 25.
Yeah, it
So
feels like he's been around for a long time, because he made his debut for West Brom against Liverpool in the mid 2010s, I think, but he was only 16 or 17 then. So yeah, he's not he's been around the block a few times, but he's actually, yeah, like you said, 25.
yeah,
So expectations for this season then, Dan, is a sort of top seven finish the minimum expectation for MK Dons?
I would maybe even argue that top three finish is minimum. Like the level of players that we're bringing in, and the expectations that the fans have because of the money being spent on the team, and getting Paul. We're not bringing in Paul Warne to hope to finish seventh. So yeah, I think top seven for me would probably be minimum, but I'm
yeah,
feeling a little bit more conservative about
bullish.
everything. I don't read. I'm more worried about us keeping a manager till the end of the season. I'm more worried about us looking like we can actually play football, rather than
Yeah.
just just go go everywhere at the first sign of
The
sort of like
reason why I think
struggle.
setting top three as the expectation rather than the target, because I think it's important to make that distinction, is that while, yes, that's true, you've got possibly the biggest financial advantage in the division, or certainly up there with whoever else, but you've also other clubs have advantages in other areas, because you finished 20th last season with a group of players that aren't used to the way that Paul Warne wants to play. So there's an adjustment period. There's actually there's a scale of improvement to be made. And whereas you might have wanted to completely overhaul the squad after the season that you just had, where you were losing every week in the second half of the season, you actually can't do that because there's a lot of players under contract. So you put those three things, the last season's form, the different style, and the number of players under contract all into the melting pot. And I think that you've got to be a little bit realistic, I think, about sort of shooting too high. So by all means aim for the top three, but I think saying if we finish fourth, we've underachieved, I think that's a bit harsh. I think for you've got to be a little bit fair and realistic here.
It might be harsh, but I do think that is the level of certainly the majority of our fan base. They are expectant, and we have had 2 seasons. We effectively underachieved. You would maybe argue in 23-24, like coming down. We had a decent squad, and the reason we probably didn't finish in top 3 was because of our poor start. So there is definitely a level of expectation amongst the fans. Add that to the fact that it's probably a weaker league this year than maybe even last year. Like you've lost your Bradfords, who are always going to be up there, Doncaster, who should always be up there, and the main sort of like competitors that you'd probably argue that are around us. I'm not quite sure on Bristol Rovers' level of financial backing, but they would seem to have sort of like a decent backing that should maybe be up there. Notts County, Chesterfield. Other than that, and this may just be me sort of like just looking at the table and just not really sort of understanding most of the teams that are in the league, but we've lost some of the teams that I would be more fearful of. Even Carlisle, even though they've gone the wrong way, if they were still in League Two, I'd be considering them to be sort of like up there, like challenging. So when you sort of like add that into the mix, I do think that there will be a certain part of the fan base that if we do finish fourth, will be like, well, we should have finished top 3 with the squad that we've got, with the players we've got. This has been an underwhelming season.
You can finish 16 places higher than the year before, and it's an underwhelming season. Gosh.
Yeah, but I think while there is that to take into consideration, again, this is a fresh line for the team. It's a brand new season. It's a brand new culture that we're bringing in. So while there is an argument that we do need a bit of a gelling period and that sort of thing, I don't think that means as much as maybe some people think. If we can bring in the sort of the level of players that we want, we get off to a good start, we win, say, like 3 of our first 4 games, then they're gelled, they're there, they're ready to go, and they would already be showing the level of expectation that I do think that we have. As I say, I would be happy with the top 7 finish, but I think just looking at the wider fan base, there would be a level of disappointment.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. What about you, Jonathan? Where are you with it all?
I'm the same as Dan. I've just been top 7 would be the minimum aim for me. If we got playoffs, I'd hate it personally, psychologically, after everything that we go through on the playoffs. I mean, I think between us and Sheffield United, you could form some form of counselling group for playoff campaigns. But I see where Dan's coming from with top 3. I mean, I possibly see Barnet possibly going all the way through with the defensive recruits that they've done this summer. I don't think you can count out Swindon with Holloway. I don't think you can count out Gillingham with Ainsworth, as much as it pains me to say, because these managers know how to get out the lower leagues, like Paul Warne. So I don't think it's going to be an easy ride. I don't think many people talk about Salford either. Obviously, we know what Robbo can do with a side. So my heart says top 3, but I think I have to agree with Dan. My head says if we get top 7 as a minimum, that would be a good season for me, given everything that we've gone through.
Interesting. So as you know, I'm going to do my 1 to 24s, and I always get it right with MK Dons. But my process for it this year is I'm going to rate each club on 14 different categories out of 10, and to sort of, I think the categories I think are going to determine their fate. So I'll throw a category at you, and you can give me your number out of 10. First one is ownership.
I'd probably say a 7, only because while they are putting their money where their mouth is, and everything sort of like behind the scenes does seem to be very, very positive, I don't think right now at this very moment you can discount last season and bringing in Scott Lindsay. While again, maybe at the time it seemed right, ultimately it didn't work, and that was their first major on the pitch decision. So yeah, I'd probably say a 7, but that's been very, very sort of like negative at it, and especially because we've seen from other clubs throwing money just to get promoted doesn't always work. It worked with Wrexham, it worked with Stockport, but it's not necessarily a given. So yeah, well, there will be expectations. Just I'm still yet to be fully convinced that we should be where we are expecting to be, if you get what I mean.
Okay. Jonathan, infrastructure, quite a wide-ranging topic, category, that one.
A very high 8, possibly 9. Obviously, the work Neil Hart's doing is a major factor in my thoughts. Obviously, depending on your thoughts on Liam Sweeting as well, that's another thing. And I just feel that the infrastructure and even things like they're relaying the pitch, they're relaying the training pitch as well. They're upgrading that, just things like that. So yeah, I'd probably say a high 8.
Okay, an 8 for infrastructure. Playing budget. 10.
10. Yeah, I don't think we can shy away from the fact that we are very, very well backed, and we are putting a lot of money into our new signings, so much so that it's inflating the rest of the football league. It's like, if you hear Darren McAntony on one of his latest podcasts, agents are using us as an excuse to ask for that 10%, 20% more from other clubs.
Management.
9 for me.
9 for management.
Paul Warne,
Jonathan.
I think that he can get.
Yeah. Feel free to. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I just think with Paul Warne, with Richie Barker, even Darren Potter to an extent, which we haven't really spoken about. Obviously, someone that has worked with Paul Warne before. I think he had good success with Stoke City. So I wouldn't mind if he tapped up his phone and maybe got Emery Tesgel in or Nathan Lowe, possibly, if we're going to be extra greedy about this. But yeah, definitely a 9 for Paul Warne. Even I play football for Paul Warne, and I've got 2 left feet.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant motivator, isn't he? So management, next one is the goalkeeping department. Let's presume that Craig McGillivray is going to be the number 1 goalkeeper next season.
I'd say a 7, probably, and that's mainly because McGillivray's time here so far has been so sort of like in and out, and Truman, while he didn't do anything wrong, he wasn't necessarily spectacular either. So I wouldn't say that we've got the best goalkeepers in the league, but I think if we do re-sign Truman, we've definitely got solid options, and that probably
you
might
like your
go
goalkeepers called McGill, don't you? With McGill in the surname.
Yeah, and if, say for example, Truman does go somewhere else, I could see us trying to sign another, again, like a League One standard goalkeeper, which would then sort of probably push the number a bit higher. But for now, I'd probably go with a 7.
7 for the goalkeeping department. Defence.
8. I think there'll be movement, particularly out. I can probably see us potentially losing Sam Sheringham. It's probably going to be
Yeah,
when
I
if
expect Sam
any
Sherring to go personally.
And if Paul Warne can get the defence for 4 clean sheets at the end of last season and then have a full pre-season with the defence, then hopefully better things are to come, because as you said, I don't think there's many better centre-back options in the league than what we have, maybe bar Chesterfield.
Midfield.
I've got a 6, I think. It's low, but as I said before, I think Thompson Summers and probably Tripp would maybe need a loan. I think that would benefit them a lot more than sort of just being in and around the squad. Jay Williams, personally, I would expect to be sold. So then, really, we've got Kelly, Lemonhay Evans, and Gilby can play in there, who we've not actually really spoken too much about.
Yeah, we've not actually mentioned him, but he's a very spirited figure, isn't he? I'm sure he'll buy into it.
Yeah, and he went through a stage last season of he was absolutely brilliant when we had our good run under Lindsay, and then he was playing with an injury for 4 months, but we couldn't drop him out of the team. So then that's why he was out of the team for the last few games, because Warne came in and was like, well, you need to recover, basically. But
Well, he
I
was
feel
a
bad
fitness
bringing him.
coach initially at Rotherham, so he's got a very good insight on that kind of thing. So
Yeah. So while it's probably a strong on paper lineup, I do think that's the position at the moment where we need a lot of changing. Which, where again, like the caliber of players that we're looking at, if we can somehow manage to get Will Collar, that would probably push that up to like a 7 or an 8, even then. But yeah,
yeah, I
for
would
right
expect
now,
those
looking at
kind of additions to be coming in.
what was that? Sorry.
I'd expect those kind of additions to be coming in.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, centre mid, as I said earlier, that's the position I probably feel would have the most sort of like change from now to the start of the season. But yeah, for right now, I'd probably say 6, and maybe other than striker, our weakest sort of like position on the pitch.
Attack.
If we're saying just strikers, I'd probably go along with Dan's 6 or 7. If we're talking a wider sort of Mendes Lang,
Let's include other players like wide men and sort of someone like Aaron Collins, who might be more of a second striker, if you like.
8, simply because I think someone like Scott Hogan or Callum Hendry could potentially leave, and we could replace them with an apt replacement, if not an upgrade. As Dan said, we've been linked with Stephen Humphreys, so yeah, say 8.
I would caveat that though and say that that's mainly because of the wider players. If we are again thinking, say, Collins might play as more of like a wide forward on the left rather than as a central striker. But in terms of actual strikers, I think that would bring the number down. But our wide options, I think, with the addition of Collins, with Mendes Lang, even Hepburn Murphy, he said he likes to play in the middle, but he can play anywhere. Yeah, it would really be. I do feel bad saying this, but Hogan and Hendry would be the two that bring that sort of level down, that number down.
Yeah, I don't know if either of them quite fit the approach. I think you're going to need some athleticism and physicality in that attack for the way that Paul wants to play. Depth for mid-June, a lot of numbers for mid-June at the moment.
Yeah, probably a 7. I think because we have got quite a big squad. We do need to sort of trim it a little bit. You'd probably argue, but we've also got a lot of versatility, as I say. So like Lemonhay Evans, he could play right wing back. He could play sort of like wide forward. He could play central midfield or attacking midfield sort of thing. And then you've got Gilby
Also,
again,
Tripp
who
can play right back as well. That Fry's
yep.
mentioned.
Honestly, Callum Tripp, he can play right back, he can play centre back, he can play centre mid, he could probably play as a goalkeeper if he actually wanted to. He's one of the most versatile players we've had come through the academy. I was about to say since George Williams, but we released him from the academy and he ended up coming back as a professional player. But yeah, no, Callum Tripp, he's also been the player that I've been most excited about going into the season for the last 4 years, I think. He's had really good pre-seasons and just never really broken into that first team fully. Like he had a few moments last year, and then he went out on loan to Gateshead and wasn't exactly setting the world alight there, as far as I'm aware. But he's probably one to watch. But yeah, just like in terms of versatility, Charlie Waller can play centre back or left back. Nathan Thompson, I think, can play right back if needed, for example. And then you've got your forwards that can play pretty much anywhere. Crowley can play centre mid, attacker mid, wide. Kelly centre mid, attacker mid. So yeah, we've got a lot of versatility, which is probably adding to the depth conversation. So 7, maybe even pushing an 8, if you sort of take the versatility into a lot of account.
Jonathan, I'll give you the casting vote. We're going 7 or an 8 for that.
I'll go 7.
We'll go 8.
Oh,
Go
I
with
gave Jonathan the casting vote.
Actually, no, I'd say go with me because I'd say go with a 7 just so it doesn't put us first.
Oh yes, that's true. Squad stability.
That's a tough one. I'd probably say 5 because we haven't fully seen what this is. This isn't a fully Paul Warne squad. If you catch my drift, he's only just starting to build his squad. So going off last season and what we've got, I know it seems a bit harsh, but yeah, that for me 5.
I agree. Yeah.
You think that's harsh? I went 4 when I was doing it. I went 4, but I'm happy with a 5. It's the same sort of comments that I've got, and like I said earlier, we've had 3 managers in our last 4 transfer windows, so it's
Next one is growth potential, and this is basically based on players you think are going to be a lot better this season versus last.
10.
10 for growth potential. Why?
We cannot be worse than last season. That's I think.
I see. From that point of view. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like in terms of
you can't sink any lower.
as I said before, like you had maybe 3 or 4 players that stood out, but even then they weren't great. Like Gilby was probably one of our better players last season, but since January when he got that injury, he was getting absolute pelters. And this is a player that had won all but one of our Player of the Season awards since he's joined the club, or like since he's been at the club. He's won like 3 Player of the Season awards in 4 years here. So if even he is one of our better players and yet has struggled, I don't think there's I think 10 has to be the number here because of just how poor last season was.
Team spirit.
If Paul Warne can get the team spirit sorted in pre-season, then
I think he will.
I'll go with a conservative 8. If he can get what he wants and get the positivity and get them running through brick walls for him and things like that, then yeah, if we're talking what he can achieve, I'd probably say 8.
Yeah, I expect him to be very good from the people management side of the job. Fitness, again, another one that I think Paul Warne's going to be very strong in.
Yeah, I think that might be high. I've got it down as a 7 because we had a few injuries last year, but with Paul Warne coming in, thinking, as you say, he was a fitness coach and he cares a lot about the fitness of his squad and he wants them to be fit and like one of the fittest in the league. Then yeah, maybe pushing an 8.
But I think maybe it's an area that the club needs to look at, like having a good S&C coach and something like that, because I do think that could be one of the reasons why Scott Lindsay was very successful at Crawley. They've got a very good S&C coach there. And I think there's maybe a question mark about whether at MK Dons it was to the same standard. So that's one thing that I would possibly... but I would also be very confident that Paul Warne's going to address that. So...
I do think as well, one of our major issues since we moved to Milton Keynes has been the training ground. We've been playing on a clay surface. It's not ever really been fit for purpose. Like for the last however many years, as soon as the weather gets a little bit down, we're playing or we're training on like a 4G, 5G pitch at one of the local schools or one of the local sort of like like all weather pitches sort of thing. So once the training ground is sorted, which it does look like it's happening now, as John said earlier, they're resurfacing it. They're putting in a lot of money towards that. That could be a reason why we do see less stupid injuries than we have done over the last 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So next final one is quality. I think that's going to be very high in terms of individual quality in the squad.
9.
I've got
Yeah.
I got down 7, but again, that's mainly because of thinking of like last season and everything. There
I
are
think
a
with
lot of question
signings
marks.
of Aaron Collins and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang, I would go with a 9. I mean, we could compromise on an 8, possibly.
Yeah, possibly. Only because, so like we were talking about Joe Tomlinson earlier, he had a very, very good 23-24, got injured towards the end of the season, and he hasn't been the same player since. Gilby again, like got injured, and he struggled playing through that injury. So just only because of the question marks based off of last season of the players that are still here, that's the one thing that would sort of limit me into just saying like 9 outright. So I'm happy with an 8. I think the signings that we're making are definitely of League One standards. So for a League Two team, they should be right up there at the end of the season.
Absolutely. So some final quick fire questions then from me, guys. What's the biggest reason to believe in MK Dons right now?
Paul Warne and the hope that you only predict us to finish 9th next season.
I'll do my best, Jonathan.
I'd add to that to say the caliber of signings that we're making as well. Like, yes, we're paying a lot of money for them, but we're paying a lot of money for a reason. They probably shouldn't be in League One, League Two, and yet they are. They're coming here to sign for us. So that would be another reason to be positive.
Biggest reason for doubt?
This might sound quite funny considering the club that we're talking about, but history. We've had such a torrid time of it the last few years that there is always going to be that question mark over, is this something that we can get a grip on early and then go on a promotion winning run? So it was one of the things that Dean Lewington said when Paul Warne came in. He was like, there's been issues in the squad for so long. Paul Warne's come in and identified them right away. That was, I think, his wording. Whether he's actually solved these issues, I think only time will tell. But as of right now, looking at last season, looking at the season before in terms of the playoffs, season before that in terms of relegation, then yeah, just history. Just we've always been the team that should be getting promoted, but yet have underachieved.
Yeah.
Just on to Dean Linning. Sorry, Jonathan, were you gonna? Well, I was just going to ask
the reasons for doubt would probably be mentality from last season. For me, it's just I don't know if Paul Warne can turn around the mentality that quickly from a losing mentality to a winning mentality. I mean, the fact he's got a pre-season for me probably suggests he will, but psychologically, will the players still be affected by last season? That's the only doubt for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just on Dean Lewington, Dan, who you mentioned earlier, he's moving into an upstairs role, I'm led to believe.
So we're starting a development team. So we've always had an under-18s, and I think there were a few years ago, where we sort of had a reserve team, if you get me. But now it's the first season we have a dedicated development team for those players that have aged out of the under-18s but aren't ready for first team. So players like, for example, Seb Stacey, our third choice goalkeeper, I would say. Callum Tripp will probably benefit greatly from that. But then you look in the past at the players that we've had to let go because we couldn't offer them like professional deals, or they weren't just making the they weren't making their most of their professional contracts. So like Dylan Asangiani, who ended up at Oxford, and I don't know where he is anymore, but Kabongo Shimanga, he was excellent for us in under 18s level. We couldn't quite get him to work professionally, and then he had to go down to non-league and effectively rebuild his career. And there's been loads of players like that. We brought in the Irish lads I mentioned earlier, probably could have helped with the development squad, and the Real Madrid guys from when we were in the Championship, like they would have benefited from like an under 23 sort of thing. So what Dean Lewington is doing,
Christian Benavente.
Yeah, and Sergio Aguza.
Yeah,
well,
Sergio
nice
Aguza.
knowledge. Well done. But yeah, so Dean Lewington has effectively moved into the I think he's the development squad manager. So he will be in charge of effectively the players that aren't young enough for the under 18s but aren't ready for first team football. So me mentioning earlier that Thompson, Summers, and Tripp maybe need loans. Maybe that's where they can get the majority of their football. For example, if we do have regular fixtures for them, and that might benefit them inside the squad environment because they'll still be training.
Especially if you've got a massive squad as well, Dan. That's the other thing, because it's like it's hard for players to maintain that sharpness if they're not playing for ages. So I can definitely see that. Yes. So one final question for me. Too early for a prediction, but give me a final feel for where you think next season is going to go. Starting with you, Jonathan.
Like we said earlier, minimum top 7, potentially aiming for top 3. We've got the manager. We're getting the players. We're getting the infrastructure. We've got a chairman that seems to be doing what he says he will. For me, as I said, just hopefully promotion automatically. Just so my head can't cope with another playoff run. I got to be honest.
Hopefully you've avoided them. Dan, final words from you.
Well, for your 1 to 24s, you are putting us 24th, and I would like that in writing, please. But no, I echo what John said. It's possibly the best place that we've been off the pitch because we now have the funds to be able to do everything that Pete Winkleman wanted to do, but just couldn't quite do it and maintain a decent first team squad at the same time. But then we are throwing a lot of money at promotion. We are effectively doing the Wrexham style build a team for the next level. So whether that works as it did there, whether it works long term in terms of we are putting a lot into the infrastructure now. So with the current financial rules, we have a lot of leeway and we can afford to do this. How long can we do that for if we don't get promoted? That's another question for me. But that's more long term rather than this season. I think for this season, there should be no reason other than the fact that we are historically underachievers that we shouldn't be up there.
Yeah, well, let's see. Well, listen, gents, thanks so much for joining us to bring your insight on MK Dons. You can follow Jonathan Harries at harrysdon87 and Dan at dippydon_95. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the MK Dons Summer Deep Dive, and we'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive very soon.